It's Earth Day, and President Bush went for a walk in the woods near the village of Saranac Lake up in the Adirondack Mountains of northern New York. He shook off the snow and also shook off criticism leveled at him earlier in the day by former Vice President Al Gore, who said in Nashville that the administration's environmental policies serve, quote, special interest instead of public interest. Asked about that, the president said hadn't paid attention to him. The president had a bit more to say than that.
For 3 decades, we've acted with clear purpose to prevent needless and at times reckless disregard of the air and the water and the soil and the wildlife. This commitment has yielded tremendous progress. Our lakes and rivers are much cleaner than they were on the first Earth Day.
And that is true, and no one should argue otherwise. The question on the table on this Earth Day is, will the air and water continue to get cleaner? That is, in some respects, a scientific question at its core, but is also a political question as well, oil and water in some respects. For all the progress of the last 3 decades, there are still places in this country, more than a few, on which it is literally unsafe to set foot. Not because they're in dicey neighborhoods, but because the soil itself in these places is a dreadful muck of so many byproducts of the modern age. Which is really too bad, but there you are. Progress does create byproducts. These places just have to be cleaned up, is all. And isn't the federal government working on that, you ask? After all, isn't that what the Superfund is for? A good question, that. What about the Superfund? In the woods of central New Jersey, politics and the environment can sometimes come together in a single spot.
See that purple material right there? Maybe George Bush would drink a glass of this and he'd think about reauthorizing the Superfund.
A local environmentalist, Bob Spiegel, has found not 1 but 2 jars of a purplish powder in the heart of an EPA Superfund site.
It's a real shame, you know, because sites like this should be cleaned up.
This particular site, once home to a factory that used chemicals and acid to extract precious metals from things like computer circuit boards, is one of 111 Superfund sites in the state of New Jersey alone. An area so polluted that some parts of the soil are purple. It's not clear whether that powder has anything to do with it, and other parts are green. Our crew had to wear protective footgear just to safely walk in.
You know, right now, as we look at the future of the Superfund program, I think we have to conclude that we're going to be calling it the not-so-Superfund. Then we're going to be calling it the non-existent fund.
Sites like this in New Jersey are at the heart of a pending collision between Democrats who control the U.S. Senate and the Bush administration. It is a battle over who will pay, the polluters responsible or taxpayers in general. The Bush administration has refused to introduce legislation that would restore a tax on industries that did pay for Superfund cleanups for years.
Without that tax, what's happening is the fund is running out of money. The cleanups are slowing down, and areas that are broadly recognized as presenting health hazards that we need to be moving on quickly are not being cleaned up.
Across the country, there are more than 1,000 Superfund sites. New Jersey has the most, but there are scores in both California and in Pennsylvania and throughout the old Rust Belt. The Clinton administration tried to restore that industry tax for 6 years running, but Republicans in Congress refused to approve it. As a result, the cleanup fund that in 1995 totaled around $3.5 billion will next year dwindle to pocket change, about $23 million.
We were all woken up early one morning with all these helicopters. We didn't know what was going on. We all came out in our pajamas.
Another New Jersey site sits in the back of Gail Horvath's house, home to a factory that once produced, among other things, Agent Orange.
We were pretty scared. We thought it was another love canal, and where we're supposed to leave our homes. We all have children. I have to say, scared. We were all scared.
Today, 11 years later, the factory called Chemical Insecticide Corporation is gone. To get into the site now, EPA has to open the lock gates. A thick, rubberized sheet covers the 5.5 acres. But the cleanup of the CIC site, promised to finally begin this year, is on hold again.
We're all ready to go. There's nothing left to do. The studies are finished. The only thing left to do is start the work. And now they're telling us that there is no money now. There is no money to begin work here.
The government says there's a good reason. Other sites, far worse, are in line for funding too, and money is tight. And besides, the final decisions haven't been made yet.
It certainly is a site that the region has flagged of concern that they would like to start this year, but it's not clear whether they will have funding.
Back on the street adjacent to the site, an answer like that isn't good enough. Not for the people who live there.
I sit back and I think, God, my kids were kind of young when they were tested for arsenic. They had to test their hair. I mean, my kids are adults already, you know. It's a long time. It's a very long time. I mean, I don't think anybody want to be living with something like that right in their backyard.
The Superfund story on this Earth Day later in the program.